Welcome to Vialet Studio, where Vialet and her guests share stories of their passions, inspirations, and spiritual journeys. Vialet creates a sacred and fun space for individuals to be able to share information about themselves, their work, and their community. We are so happy you have joined us today. Let's get started with your host, the magical creator of Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, Vialet. Vialet Rayne.
So welcome everyone to Vialet Studio. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited. I have Sherry Hess with me today, who is about all tastes. And so we're going to learn a lot about flavors and taste. So Sherry, share with me your journey. What got you to the point that you are today? Why did you dig into flavors and spices and what got you here?
Well, do you have 53 years for me to tell you my story?
Right?
Yeah, it's like a lifelong story when you look back on it, isn't it? It's just crazy because when you put all the pieces together, it really probably started in my childhood when, we always had a garden. And growing food, I grew up in New Jersey, and yes, New Jersey is called the Garden State. And I lived where we actually had gardens and farms, and it was very, very bucolic and beautiful. And my dad was a farmer, so we always had gardens. And when you're a kid, you don't really appreciate the fresh green beans, right? And the stewed tomatoes that you put in a jar and you have them all year long, right? Like that's kind of like where I was first introduced to like growing food. And we never really had fancy food in my house, and I never really experienced, we didn't have a lot of money. I didn't really experience a lot of complex food, I guess. It was just simple, healthy, grow your own food kind of situation. But as you go through life, and it's interesting to look at the timelines of where I fall in the world of how food has changed. And ultimately I just kind of came back to this place where I recognized what is happening to our food, and watching people's health decline and my own health declining. And the journey around food it's really been lifelong, but I would say that probably the pivotal points for me when I really started diving into the reverence and importance around our sense of taste was probably shortly after I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. This is probably about 10 years ago, and visited all the top docs in the state and didn't feel well. No one really knew how to help me. I was kind of in the phase of diagnosed with autoimmune where, yes, you have it, but we can't really do anything about it, right? So diving into really using food as my medicine became the way I felt better. And in the process of doing that, I was given supplements to help with my immunity, to help with my digestion, to help with my stress levels, this inflammation and stress in my whole body. And in those supplements, lo and behold, herbs and spices, right? So I'm looking at the ingredients of the supplements, and I'm seeing turmeric and rosemary and chamomile and all of these things. And I'm like, well, this is food, right? Like, why are we just putting this on our food? We're also living in a time where people don't know how to cook, right? They don't know how to make food taste good. And here we have all this food in a capsule, not getting to experience the flavor of it. And then also we're also very confused about what we're supposed to be eating, right? We have all this outside knowledge about what eating healthy looks like, and it changes all the time. So I really got to this place where I just started asking myself, well, what is the purpose of our sense of taste anyway, right? Like, we are a divine body. We have these tools and these senses that are designed to inform us. And yet our sense of taste has become this kind of superficial, we don't really pay attention to it beyond what, like the experience in our mouths, right? We're like, oh, that tastes good. And then you swallow it and then you forget about it. And we don't really connect to the wisdom of our taste buds. So Sorry, that was a little bit of a long-winded. It wasn't quite 53 years, but it's been a long journey, right? And a lot has happened to really make me passionate about this.
Well, and you talk about food is changing, and those that are really connected understand that the structure of food and how we're manipulating all of that has
Yes.
a big impact on food. I mean, the other day I brought home a plum cherry or something crazy like that, right? I wanted to try this, and my husband made fun of me for days. You're eating like this, created science experience, Violet. And I go, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Whereas, our flavors of our food are changing based on all these changes that we're making so that veggies and fruit are bigger, or that they
Right.
produce more,
Absolutely.
all that stuff. And so, in your knowledge in doing this, what are you seeing in this, and what's happening out there?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because what has happened in agriculture specifically, and really, my big message is, when it comes down to it, where I get most excited about is the connection between our taste buds and the earth. It really is, because we really haven't been taught or allowed the freedom to trust our sense of taste, in that it is guiding us around nutrition, and nutrition comes from the earth. It comes from growing and raising animals the way they're meant to be grown and raised, right? So, humans, we're so smart. We're so smart when it comes to, like, oh, there's a problem, I'm going to fix it. So for instance, when it comes to like how food has changed, we all know that there's such a thing as pesticides and herbicides, right? Like, we know that there are farmers have issues with insects. So we smart humans decided to create pesticides to kill the insects without looking at what the long-term big effects of that is going to be, right? And now we're struggling to save the bees. So when it comes to how we changed our food, it's exactly what you said. It's about yield, right? Like, farmers or scientists have developed seeds and genetic modification and fertilization and all these chemical kind of short-term narrow focus solutions to what we think is a problem. So for instance, yield, let's promise that the farmer will get more yield, and we're going to grow it in a way that it's sturdier so that we can ship it across the country, so that the people, on the other side of the country can experience the tomato that you're growing. So we're going to grow it so that it's firmer and harder and ripens on the way. And, we have all these other like solutions that we're trying to match, but in the process, we've lost taste and nutrition in our food. Flavor and nutrition have gotten kind of sidelined as something that's not important, as a result of trying to meet these other goals. And it's not something we've ever been able to kind of prove before, right? Like, yeah, you can taste a grocery store tomato versus, one that you grow in your backyard, and recognize the taste difference. But there's never been a way to prove that that is actually better for you. But now that technology is starting to show up, and it's really, really cool. So, it's my hope that we can go back to this idea that, hey, guess what? When you taste that tomato that has more sweetness, more sour, a little more bitter even, right? More of a complex flavor profile, that flavor profile actually represents a higher nutrition profile. And that's where I'm really, focusing on bringing people's awareness. Because when we have a carrot that doesn't taste like a carrot, and we feel like we need to dip it in manufactured flavors of ranch dressing, that isn't nutritious at all. It's a complicated place to be, right? Like, it's because we as humans are always choosing flavor. We choose flavor, but we're not connecting the dots to flavor equals nutrition, right?
That's so awesome. And I love how you use that sense to help people with their health, and how you're connecting some of that. So talk to us a little bit about how all that works. For somebody's like, okay, I'm interested. What do I need to know about this? What should I be looking for? What should I be researching or finding?
Yeah, so there are some really great communities, and it's interesting because I've got the culinary background, right? And I've always kind of been in this place where I understand how to make things taste good. Flavor's just always been like the easy part of cooking for me, is knowing how to make stuff taste good. So that's kind of the start for what I recommend a human does, is start by just recognizing. So we have 5 categories of flavor that we experience on our taste buds alone. Now, the entire tasting experience is really a combination of really all of our senses. When we are eating, it's one of the only times we're engaging all 5 of our senses at once. But if you break it down to the actual like interpretation of nutrition, what we actually experience on our taste buds, if we were able to remove our sense of smell, is these 5 categories of flavor. And within these 5 categories of flavor is where the knowledge is, where the wisdom is around how it's supporting your body. So quickly going through them, sweetness is actually supposed to be caloric. So sweetness represents energy. It represents giving your body the energy it needs to be fueled and to do, to move, to have action, to be able to do anything in life. Sweetness is actually the only category of flavor that we can survive on alone. The others are supportive categories, but without sweetness, sweet being calories, we can't survive. So, the difference that I probably should highlight here is when I talk about the 5 categories of flavor and how we need to learn them. The importance here is that the flavors are grown and raised into the food, right? I call it living flavor. So flavor that is coming from nature, that's coming from the source of what we're eating. So sweetness is energy. Sour is acidic. So acidic is what helps support your digestion, what helps break down food into, smaller nutrients so that your body can absorb them. So acidic, or, lemon is the classic example, right? So if you think about when you suck on a lemon, you immediately get that salivary response, right? So that's your body telling you, this is what I'm doing. I'm starting the digestive process, right? Sweet, sour, bitter. Bitter is what we're all missing in our lives, and a lot of that has to do with how food is being created, and processed food is being created without anything bitter. We're also told by a lot of people in the flavor industry that bitter is poison, but what bitter truly is medicine. And yeah, medicine can be poisonous in the wrong dose, in the wrong kind, and too much, right? But what we're completely missing out on by eliminating bitter is the fact that that is where the detoxification happens. Bitter is what stimulates bile production. Bitter is what stimulates, the removal of waste in your body. So bitter is a really important flavor. Salty. So salty is minerals, right? And mineral depletion in our soils is such a real thing right now. It is a big reason why our soils are dying and our food can't be grown anymore without chemicals. So salty flavors, and it's not just sodium chloride, like other minerals participate to that salty level that we have, and that is supportive of all of our organs, right? So salty, what am I missing? Umami. So umami is a flavor that most people aren't familiar with. Chefs know it. Sometimes people see it like on trendy menus and stuff. It's starting to show up. Typically it's in like Asian menus. But umami is the flavor of protein. It is literally the flavor of amino acids. So it strengthens your body. It rebuilds your cells. So the first thing to do is to start to pay attention to these flavors. And what's cool about these flavors is that when they show up in nature, they don't come alone. So to distinguish sweetness in a processed food versus sweetness in nature, in nature, sweetness always comes with that bitter. It always comes with the bitter that helps it to process. So I always use an apple as an example. So an apple is typically sweet, right? You have that sweet apple, but it's wrapped in a bitter skin. And the bitter skin is where all the antioxidants and the polyphenols and it's protection. It's the medicine for the apple, right? So then when you eat that, you're getting the medicine for the apple in addition to the fuel on the inside. So that's one really, the best way to start for yourself is just start to create the awareness around those 5 categories of flavor. And then when you want to get like, college level, you can go into like, and this is what I do all the time, like how do we translate this into how we grow our food, right? So that it is more flavorful, so that the antioxidants, the polyphenols, the strength, the proteins in the plants, like this is where we need to go. We need to go to the soil to fix the flavor in our food, which will then heal us and the planet. It's a really simple mission if you ask me.
So how do we find this food? So I'm not a gardener. Well,
Okay.
I play at it. I have a cherry tomato plant always in the summertime. It's on the patio because I love cherry tomatoes. But it's not the only thing that I really grow and play with is I love cherry tomatoes. So I always have fun getting a plant, putting it on my patio, and babying it all through because our seasons are so short here that by the time it really starts growing and doing something, we're getting close to cold weather. Like right now, it's having a lot of fun, and it's like, okay, we only have a few more weeks.
Right.
Pump it up. No. In Colorado. So for those listening, how do we find is it organic? Is it growing? Where do we go and find what we're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's the short answer to that is definitely grow your own. But you know what? I get it, man. Growing your own, it's a lot of work. And here in Colorado, not only do we have short seasons, we got hail, right? And people get very frustrated because they plant something and then we get a hailstorm and it shreds everything. So, there's farmers markets are a great way to get stuff. Now, you asked the question about organic. Organic is one of those, it's an interesting step in the process. But just like everything else that that gets regulated and defined as a word, the regulations change. And so organic is a step to better food because it doesn't have the toxins that a conventionally grown, sprayed, genetically modified, kind of like there's spectrums, right, of qualities of food. And this is what I was saying, like up until now, there really hasn't been any way to distinguish the difference. It was just like a carrot is a carrot is a carrot. And if you looked at organic versus conventional, the only thing that you really knew was that the organic was not going to have the toxin level that potentially the conventional would have, right? But the growing methods in both of those, and even organic, has become more commercialized, and there's been more things that have been kind of allowed in organic. So really, and organic farming is, it doesn't really look at the big picture of bringing life back to the soil. So that's like the next step level of ways that people are starting to change and grow things. And it's not easy to find necessarily, but the best thing you can do is if you go to a farmer's market is just drum up conversations with people, ask them how they're growing things. Different parts of the country are way better. Here in Colorado, a lot of the stuff that's grown on the western slope, when I was in culinary school, we actually spent time on the farms over there. Really, so they're doing like biodynamic, and there's agroforestry, and there's all these like more encompassing ways that people are growing, where they're really looking at life cycle and the life in the earth instead of just the chemicals that compose, the things that make plants grow. We're just starting to really broaden our minds. So that's a long-winded answer. Farmers markets, anything fresh grown is definitely better. I think that the jury is still out for me on hydroponics. There are a lot of people that are doing things like tower gardens and, growing things hydroponically. And I think a lot of the stuff in the grocery store is now hydroponic. We just don't even know it, right? And I think that you can probably find more nutrient dense stuff that way. But what's exciting to me is in some of these soil conferences that I'm attending is they're creating devices now that you can take to the grocery store and actually potentially measure nutrient density on things. So when that starts to happen, if that starts to be a real thing, that becomes mainstream and easy to use, then I think we can start to see a little bit of a demand to change and to have more readily available nutrient dense foods. So it's not that it doesn't exist in the grocery store, it's just we don't know, right?
Yeah, there's not enough information.
Right.
And it's really shifting to, we've been so programmed for I want it now and I want it immediately, that fast food really took over, which isn't healthy at all.
Right.
But there's nothing fast food out there that you can get that's healthy. Like if you really want to eat healthy and you need something like right now in this moment, it is very difficult to find. And we're shifting back to cooking it ourselves, preparing it at home, thinking about, and also how many of us run out and we're eating lunch or breakfast on the go,
right,
and we're not even tasting or connecting with the food at all. We're just pouring it in or eating it and not even noticing, what a different experience it is to pause and go, oh my gosh,
yeah,
this is so good and it tastes so good, and slowing down and letting your body process the food versus, okay, I'm on the go, I'm running, I gotta,
yeah, it's our society for sure, and it is. I actually believe that is a big obstacle in why growing more flavorful, nutrient dense food is not a priority, because of exactly what you said, right? We have this we've created for ourselves this lifestyle that is on the go, and we want stuff quickly, and we don't prioritize the experience of eating, even so much as, even if you're not in a hurry, when I mentioned that we just kind of let taste be this thing that gets us past our tongue, right? Whereas if we're going to fully embody and understand what taste does for us, we have to pay attention to it beyond our taste buds, right? Like, how does your body feel? Because you got to let your whole body correlate the story of, when I eat this, I'm tasting X, Y, and Z, and then my body feels, like there, you got to complete the cycle of what that flavor is telling you based upon the rest of the feedback from your body. So the fact that we're just letting, a manufactured flavor be only important enough to get it down, like, we're not teaching our bodies anything, right? Like, we're not letting ourselves complete that knowledge. The wisdom that's happening in our body is just kind of in this incomplete circle when we just let taste be this superficial thing. So it's a big part of it, the lifestyle of things, and this needing food in a hurry, and it's where we are, right? Like, there, you can't put judgment on it because it is where we are. But I would just, what I try to tell people in this scenario of, when you have to eat like that is you got to pay attention to your ingredients. And sadly, there's one ingredient that we all just kind of glance over and assume that it's something healthy. And it's honestly a black hole of, we don't know what it is. And that's natural flavoring. And it's on everything. It's where monosodium glutamate can be hidden. There's just, the food industry has ways of hiding things all the time. So unless you know that every single ingredient in your food is an actual food, you don't really know where the flavor is coming from, right? And that's not dangerous. It's just not authentic to what you're experiencing on your tongue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I love what you do. I love what you bring to us on the knowledge, that gets us to pause a moment and think, because I love spices and ingredients that we put in. And even in some of the classes, I really try to bring forward, what is your intention? And you can use some of this very intentionally, to create different things in your life, not only health, but your whole life, because it's very natural, it's very connected
Absolutely.
to the earth. And so, like cinnamon and some of these great spices that bring in different energies and health and all that, how often are we using them, right, effectively, and how can we bring them forward? You talking about your supplements and stuff that they were doing that had herbs and stuff in it. How
Yeah.
can we use that more often, even in teas that are becoming more and more popular, of blends of herbs and
Yeah.
natural ingredients that can help with
Yeah.
health and focus and all that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of magic in plant, it's plant medicine, right? I mean, spices and teas are a form of plant medicine. And that was really back when I was creating the spice blends, I wanted to basically take herbalism and turn it into culinary. It was culinary herbalism because I was combining spices that had similar benefits into something that was balanced in flavor and was easy to use, with the intention being flavor and health, right? So if we can continue to make that connection of flavor and health, and it's really, really smart to do it through spices and teas, because just take, for instance, chamomile, right? So a chamomile tea, if you were to break that down, and what happens sometimes with the herbs and the spices is there's a lot of aroma to them, right? So a lot of the experience that you're getting is not just flavor, but also the aroma, and that's what creates the complexity of it. But like teas and spices in general, like the basic flavor profile of most of them is bitter. So flashing back to a couple minutes ago when I talked about the importance of bitter and being the detoxifying, being what, gets the bioproduction that removes the toxins from your body, that like almost every tea has an element of bitterness to it, even if it's just green tea, even if it's like coffee, right? These are all bitter flavors. So by tasting them and recognizing, okay, this chamomile tea, pay attention to the flavor of it, pay attention to how you feel, and then you can create that correlation, right? Like, oh, I know that this flavor has this reaction in my body. And a lot of times we just dismiss the flavor of it, and sometimes we have to mask the flavor, right? Like if you don't like the bitterness of a tea, sometimes we add honey to it. And if it's a good, real, unfiltered raw honey, it's a beautiful thing to add, because you're getting additional benefits from the honey as well. And then you're counteracting the bitter a little bit. And that happens with every tea. So teas and spices are such a good place to really start playing with, what am I tasting? How's my body responding? And how can I learn from this plant about the flavor and the support it's giving my body?
I love that. I love that. Well, I know that you got a TEDx coming up and you've got lots of stuff going on. So share with us a little bit about some of the stuff that's happening in your world.
Yeah, TEDx is the big focus right now. It's really fun when you have this concept that you're bringing into the world that darn well people are looking at you going, what? When I talk to people about, I teach people how to trust their sense of taste, they're like, you're joking, right? Like, are you telling me I can eat stuff that tastes good and it's good for me? Well, yes and no, right? There are parameters here. But when I auditioned for TED, and the first step is they accept your application, and you're like, what? And it just is this huge kind of justification, right? Like, okay, people want to hear this. And then the next level is you go and audition, and then you wait for that next call or elimination, and then what? I'm going to speak, right? And then all of a sudden it becomes very real. So very excited about that. It's going to be October 2nd, coming up fast. And yeah, I'm really, really excited about bringing it to, an audience that really doesn't have any idea what I'm going to talk about, right? Like, well, they have a blurb, right? Or a little bio from me, if they even read that. But the TED stage is such a, I love it because it's innovation, right? And it's new ways of thinking. I mean, their whole thing is ideas worth spreading, right? So if I can step on that stage and have people walk away really curious about how they can use flavor to heal themselves and the planet, that's my goal.
That's pretty awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I look forward to hopefully getting bleeps because they record those and you can go out sometimes and check them out.
Yep.
So I definitely want to be able to go out and check those out and check you out and see. I love watching TEDx speakers. I think that's great. You also do videos and a show and all that. Share a little bit of that with us too.
Yeah. So I do have a YouTube channel called Let's Talk Taste with Sherry, Saving the Earth One Flavor at a Time. It has been super fun to record. I have all kinds of expert guests that I bring onto the show. What I love about talking about food and flavor and the connection to the earth is that there's such a broad category of people that get it once they make the connection, right? So chefs that understand how, why they understand the importance of using a local farmer because it tastes better, because their goal is for their guests to experience flavor, right? So the chefs that know that locally grown stuff that's grown in the right soils tastes better, they don't necessarily make the connection to nutrition, but they know it tastes good. So I have chefs on the show. I have agronomists on the show that understand the soil and how things taste better when they grow. I have like food manufacturers on the show. I have the owner of Spice Company, Burlap and Barrel, on my show. I've got film documentary makers on the show. So the guests are my favorite part of my show. But I've actually gotten feedback from people that say they prefer just listening to like things that I talk about too, because there's so many different ways that you can take this this concept. And yeah, I really am enjoying the YouTube channel. So thank you.
I bet it's beautiful and great. I want to sit down and listen to it because I've had you at my center talking about flavor and taste, and I just love having you come in and talk about that because people don't think about it in that way until you start that. So I love being able to offer that. So
well, and I love coming, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Is there any other things that we can connect with you on? We've talked about TEDx, so people down the road can probably go out and search for that and find that if they want to hear some more, and your show. And so I know at one time you were doing spices. You're not doing those anymore.
Right.
And so you're just trying to educate people. So I love that too. Do we get to see a book someday? Are you writing a book someday?
I am actually writing a book.
All right.
It's in very early stages, but yeah, I mean, the concept of what I talk about in the business aspect. I mean, my business is called The Flavor Remedy. So the book is likely going to have the same title, because I look at it as flavor being the remedy to so many things, right? When we look at it through this lens of our connection to the earth and how flavor is talking to us, it can be the remedy for, boring food, for our own health, for health of the planet, for just so many things, right? Bringing more flavor, and who doesn't want more flavor, right? We've just kind of let flavor be something that we don't necessarily concern ourselves with the source of it. And that's where I think things need to shift. So yeah, I mean, and ultimately, hopefully there will be some courses to help people, kind of distinguish between when flavors are manufactured versus, living flavors. I really want to build community around this so that you can come and find resources. Well, where do I find, help on how to garden, how to grow my own food? Where do I find food manufacturers that are using real ingredients? Where do I find chefs that are using, really rich, nutrient, flavor dense food? So that's my long-term vision, is to create community where we can gather to share resources around these things that can support this concept.
And I love that. And I also think I could see community gardens also, because those are popping up more and more, where people are creating these community gardens. And we have some of those here in Denver that are popping up. So being able to connect with some of those, I think, would be really helpful as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Matter of fact, one of the guests on my show, his name is Rod Tyler, and he is the owner of a company called Garden Socks. And I found them because I wanted to, to also address the food deserts that we have. We have lots of areas that don't have access even to produce in grocery stores, right? So being able to grow food in more urban areas, more urban gardening. So he has these things called garden socks that are kind of these mesh tubes that you can put compost in. You don't even have to dig up good dirt anywhere. You just put compost in them and you cut holes in them, and they have an irrigation system if you want it. And it allows you to basically grow food on rooftops. You can grow food on pavements, in parking lots. And there's a gentleman in LA, his company is called Crop Swap LA. Of course, LA is a different environment than us, right? They have a little different temperatures than we do. But he's doing amazing things to bring food to food desert areas and real delicious produce and stuff. So accessing food, in these areas that don't necessarily have access to healthy food is a big part of what I would like to do too. So community gardens, and actually I wanted to call my community the community garden. So that's kind of my vision.
I love that. I love that. And I love the creativity, right? Thinking outside of the box. How can we create these things in places where we wouldn't normally have access or have this type? So I love that. That's pretty awesome. So yeah. Well, Sherry, thanks for being on our show. Please check out Sherry's website and some of the things that we've talked about. I love that. And when you get closer to your book and your community, we'd love to have you back on to talk some more about what's happening in your world. So we'll keep you on the radar for that.
Oh, thank you. I would love to come and share, of course. Thank you for having me. This has been just great.
I love it. I love it. And so thank you for those that are watching. We really appreciate you checking out these videos, and we hope to see you really soon at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.
Thank you for joining us. To find out more about Vialet and how she can help you discover your spiritual gifts, head over to discoveryourspiritualgifts.com and on YouTube at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts. You can also send a personal message to Vialet through email, violet@discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. Until next time, remember, we are meant to have abundant and joyful lives. We hope to see you really soon at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.
Discover connection, awaken sacredness.